Howdy, y'all. I got to thinking the other day about how when I was growing up, it was improper to say the word pregnant. I reckon it was considered a wordy dirt. Mama referred to it as being in the family way, and to get that way, you had to engage in the marriage act. Meemaw called it being with child. But it got me to studying on old mountain midwives. They were called granny wives here in rural Appalachia, and I stumbled across a legendary Appalachian midwife whose story needs to be told. Her name was Orleen Hawks Puckett, and her first name is written about 11 different ways, but some notary at some point wrote it down as Orleen, and that's what I'm going to call her. I couldn't find an exact birth year on her, but it was sometime in the mid-1800s in Surry County, North Carolina, which is in the northwestern part of the state. Think Mayberry and Mount Pilot from the Andy Griffith Show, which is really Mount Airy and Pilot Mountain. And Surry County borders both the Piedmont and the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina, and to the north it borders Virginia in the Blue Ridge Mountains. She had no formal education and couldn't read or write, and when she was 16, she married a man named John Puckett, who moved her off to Virginia to a place called Groundhog Mountain. Orleen experienced so much tragedy in her life, she lost 24 children. The ones that was born alive, they only lived a few days, excepting for the first one, which was a daughter named Julie Ann, who passed away at age 7 months from the diphtheria. The thinking is that the babies passed away from the Rh factor, known as the Rh hemolytic disease, and that's when the mama is Rh negative and the baby she's carrying is Rh positive, and the two are incompatible, and the mama's immune system attacks the baby and causes all kinds of heck. And it usually doesn't happen in the first pregnancy, but the ones thereafter. And they didn't know about it back then. It's treatable and preventable now, but unfortunately back in the 1800s, nobody knew what it was. 20 of her littlins are buried in a row in the Reed Puckett Cemetery in Virginia. The other 4 are buried on top of Groundhog Mountain near their home. She was 37 when she had her last one. In 1889, they moved to Carroll County, Virginia, and that's when her midwifing commenced. She was about 45 or 50 years old at the time, and it all started when a neighbor came a-knocking, saying that his wife was fixing to pop out a baby, and Orleen went and helped, and with that, she went on to deliver babies the rest of her life. They wasn't no doctors or other granny midwives in the area, so it was up to her, and she had no training, she was illiterate, but she had skill and she had compassion, and she went all over the area birthing babies, and she'd go any time of the day or night in all manners of weather conditions. If it was icy, she'd put nails in the bottom of her outer shoes. If the laboring mama was a fur piece away, she'd ride her old gray mule named Rhodey, or her red horse named Roy, or if and she's lucky, she'd hitch a ride with somebody passing by on a horse and buggy. She carried a worn-out satchel that had things like scissors and twine and gauze and maybe some apple brandy for medicinal purposes only. And there wasn't no medicine to be had, but she knew them Appalachian folk remedies like tea and herbs and castor oil, which is still used to this day to stimulate labor. And she did things like put an axe under the bed if the mama was hemorrhaging after birth. And the proper word for bleeding out is exsanguinate. Another remedy she used is if when the labor stalled out, she'd do a feathering technique, and that's when she'd take a goose feather and put it in the fire and get it to smoldering, and then she'd put it under the laboring mama's nose, and it'd get her to having a coughing and a sneezing fit, and the baby would come right out. Now, nowadays they use a drug called Pitocin to get labor started up again, when all they have to do is use a goose feather. I'll have y'all to know that she delivered over 1,000 babies, and here's the clincher, not one single mama or baby were lost at a time when maternal and fetal mortality were at an all-time high. And one of her nieces said that she had borne 5 generations. She's delivering babies into her 90s. Miss Orleen never got paid in cash. It was always gifts or food like corn and beans, apples, honey, hog meat, fat back, maybe a live chicken or 2. And she and her husband were always cash poor. They never went to the grocery store. They grew a garden, they foraged in the woods, or they traded for the food. And her husband died in 1912, and she was said to be inconsolable when that happened. In 1939, she had to move away from her home because of the Blue Ridge Parkway being built. She moved into a small cabin and then she passed away 3 weeks later. She had just stopped midwifing about a year prior to that. There's a cabin on that property, and I'm not sure if it's really hers or not, but it's been preserved in her honor by the National Park Services, and you can view it from milepost 189.9 on the Blue Ridge Parkway in Southern Virginia. The Orlean Hawks Puckett Institute was built in her honor in Asheville here in western North Carolina, and it's a place for child and family development, and it's still in operation today. I should have gone over there, but it's 27 degrees for the high with a feel-like temperature of 13, so no. She's also honored in Virginia as being one of the Virginia Women of History. So that's the story of the legendary Southern Appalachian midwife, Orlean Puckett, who lost 24 children of her own and was never called Mama, but she brought forth over 1,000 healthy babies into the world at a time when childbirth was the leading cause of death among women. She used her tragedy and loss and was able to bring forth 5 generations of lives, and she was loved by all, and she was affectionately known as Aunt Orlean. The end.